Okay, thank you, Linda, and welcome to you all to an introduction to civic learning, engagement, and action data sharing. My name is David Bleckley, and I help to manage this project known as CivicLEADS. So I wanted to start with a little bit of an overview of what today's webinar will look like. So we'll start with the what, why, who, and how of CivicLEADS, followed by a demo of the CivicLEADS website and our search tools. We'll talk a little bit about our future plans moving forward because CivicLEADS is a new project, and then we will get to your questions. So please do enter your questions into the questions pane of the webinar. So first of all, what is CivicLEADS? CivicLEADS stands for Civic Learning, Engagement, and Action Data Sharing. We are a data archive. We have curated data from research that examine the ideas of civic education and involvement, and that's across disciplines. So we have data sets from education, from political science, from sociology, economics, and many more disciplines. We are a project of ICPSR at the University of Michigan. ICPSR is part of the Institute of Social Research here at the University of Michigan. And CivicLEADS is funded by the Spencer Foundation as part of their New Civics initiative. And so to give a little bit more background both about New Civics and CivicLEADS, there has been a push in the research of civic education to look at civic engagement as part of education, as well as civic education in the traditional sense in the classroom. So looking at service learning, looking at media literacy, and looking at how do students and young people conceptualize community, as well as how do we help students to learn about that community and their role in affecting change in those communities. So that's a little bit about what CivicLEADS does, and now we'll jump into why is that important. So as I mentioned, civic education research has been expanding. It's not just about that high school government class anymore and why it's important to vote. There is a lot of research that's undertaken in diverse disciplines. We have folks doing research in communication, in women's studies, in public health, and as well as in political science and education, human development, and psychology. So it's really an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary topic for research, and so as students and emerging researchers are trying to jump into this area of research, they need access to high quality data, and what will often happen is that students and junior faculty will try to do some one-off data collection, and they end up having smaller sample sizes and aren't able to answer the questions that they might set out to answer because of the limitations of the data set. So we really want to get high quality data into the hands of those folks who are just starting out in this area of research, as well as more established faculty. And so we are trying to have resources and data available from for researchers all the way from undergraduate students through emeritus faculty. And so the sharing of these data and how do researchers find these data have been pretty fragmentary up until now, which is why ICPSR and the Spencer Foundation thought it was really important to try to find a way to have a centralized repository to really allow researchers access to these data in a way that hasn't been done before. Again, who should use these data and who should use CivicLEADS? Researchers and students and emerging researchers who don't have access to larger data sets and robust data, folks who are looking at existing data from a different vantage point. We have a lot of evidence that shows a lot of our data sets have been developed within one discipline, but then reanalyzed through another disciplinary lens, and that really allows new insights to be generated from existing data. If researchers are interested in sharing their own primary data, we allow for that too. So we have a data deposit tool that helps researchers to get their data in front of their peers and in front of colleagues in other departments and other fields, so that their data can get a new life and be examined from a whole different perspective. We also really encourage instructors who are maybe doing a research methods class, or who are studying civic education, civic engagement, to utilize our data and incorporate that into their teaching. So how does CivicLEADS work? At our core, we are a data archive, and so we have publicly available data with extensive documentation, as well as other resources. And a few examples of our diverse data sets that we have are the Circle study, the development and validation of the critical consciousness scale, the seminal study, the CivicLEADS study, which is the IEA's 1999 study of civic education across 28 different countries. We also have some of the study of political socialization data, so that we can look at parents and children's political socialization and compare that. There is the CID survey, as well as one of our newer data sets is the Youth Participatory Politics Survey Project, and we have the first wave of that data currently, and we look forward to acquiring and processing and eventually sharing with you all the subsequent waves of that survey project as well. So as you can see on this table, there's a lot of data here. We have thousands of cases, thousands of variables, and we have ways that you can drill into that in a real powerful way. So one of the ways that you can really explore the data are through our web-based tools. We have a data search tool, which looks something like this, and I apologize if it's small on your screen. We will get to a live demo, and it will be a little bit easier to look at there. We also have a variable search, which draws upon our documentation of variable level metadata to really allow researchers to look for question text, to look for keywords within variable names and variable labels to find those key data points that they're really searching for. We also have a publication search, so if you find an article that is really addresses some of your research interests, you can work backwards and find the data set that was used to create the analysis for that publication. And then we can also work from the data to the publication. So if you find a data set that is really interesting to you, you can then read publications that were based on the analysis of that data set. And finally, as I mentioned before, we do have a data deposit tool so that you're able to share your data. If you have a primary data collection that you really think has got the capacity to be analyzed and looked at in new ways, we really encourage you to share that with us. So with that in mind and that little overview, let's take a look at CivicLEADS.org. So here we are, CivicLEADS.org's homepage, and as you can see, front and center is a search box for data. So we are a data archive, and although we have a lot of other great tools, we want people to know that you can search for data here. Just to look at the top level navigation, there is the kind of standard About Us link. There's a data search tool that gives some more tips to how to search for data beyond just this search bar. Variable search tool, publication search tool, and the data deposit tool, as I mentioned before. And then the news link also has some of our up-to-date announcements. So most recently, we had a reminder for make sure to sign up for this webinar. So without further ado, let's search for some data. So if I search for voting, which is a very common topic in civic education and engagement data, we can see that it brought up 20 studies. And then if we want to filter our results, we can say, let's look at specifically voting behavior. And then we want to have only the most recent data. So let's look at 2010 to 2016. And that filtered us down to the circle study. So let's click on that, and we can see what an average study homepage will look like. So at the top, we have the title of the study, we have the principal investigator or investigators, there's this brief summary, and then access notes. That will tell you if the data are restricted or publicly available. At this point, all of our data on CivicLEADS are publicly available. It is possible in the future that we might have some restricted data, and that if we do have that, this will be where you can find out about how to access that restricted data. And then possibly the most important part, here's how you download the data sets. But I think even more crucial than the data is the documentation. So if we click here, you can see our code book. So this will be the code book for the circle study. We have some processing notes about what are some of the steps that our processors took in creating this data set and making it publicly available. There are some string variables to think about, as well as the original PI's documentation, and then a lot of frequency tables and information about our data sets, including the question text. So this is a really important document. There's also, if you are interested in the sampling and some of the methodological considerations, that will sometimes be in the documentation, but we can also find it here in the methodology section. So learning about the sample, learning about weights, and how to utilize the sampling and weighting so that your secondary analysis of the data are really more statistically robust. As we continue to scroll down, you can see the related publications. So here are all of the publications in our database that are related to the circle study. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a really great way to see what other researchers have found in the data, as well as to generate your own research questions, kind of standing on the shoulders of those giants. And then if we scroll down further, we see the variable search tool. So not only can you search for variables across data sets, which I'll show you in a moment, you can search within a data set. So here we are, we're in this study, and let's say that we're interested in voter registration, not just voting. So let's take a look and find out what registration pulls up. And so here we found that there are 5 variables that are related to registration. And so you can see what those variables are called, what is the label and the question text. In this case, these are not generated from a survey question, so it's data that have been pulled into into the data set about the respondents' area of residence. So the registration rate for where that respondent is. But we can also compare some variables. So here we have this 2008 registration and a 2010 registration, and we can just compare those two side by side. And you can see a frequency table about those registration rates, and you know, that can sort of get your questions flowing as you start to explore the data sets. So, okay, that's how you look at variables within a study. Let's go up here and take a look at how do you search for variables across studies. So let's use that same keyword and look at registration. And so here you can see a lot of these are coming up from the same study that we were just in. So let's filter out that study. Let's say I don't want to look at the circle study. Let's say I want to look at the study of political socialization. And so here we have some questions and variables that are drawn from that study. And again, you could compare across if you were interested. Now we also have our publication search tool. So here, let's use our classic voting keyword. Oops, didn't work that way because I didn't finish typing it. And here we have all of our publications related to voting. And again, there are great filters here. We can filter by publication year, the type of publication, whether it's an article or a report or thesis. There is which journal is it written in case it was a journal article, as well as author. And then you can filter by the study within CivicLEADS as well. And for all of you power users, you can export whatever results you choose into a variety of formats. The next part of our navigation is our data deposit tool. So I encourage you, if you have primary data which you're interested in sharing related to civic education and engagement, I encourage you to come visit this part of our site. There's some really great information about how to prepare your data for sharing. You can also read a lot more about how do you incorporate the end result of archiving into your data preparation, all the way from planning your study through your own analysis and data cleaning into the final preparation and submitting it for archival. So I really encourage you to take a look at this website, as well as there's a PDF version so that you can pull it down off the internet as well. And then finally, when you're ready to deposit your data, you just click on the big orange button to find our data deposit form. And that's where you will not only upload your files for us to take a look at, you can incorporate, you can enter a lot of great study level metadata about your own methodology, about the topic of the study, the subjects who are involved in the study, your sample size, all of that great background information, which will really help people as they use your data in the future. So that's a very quick overview about our website. I guess one more place to look is the actual data search page. Again, the main page has got this massive search bar. Every other page has got a search for data bar at the top, because we really do want to make it easy for users to search for data. But on the actual data search page, There are some tips about how to make your search more effective. You can also browse by some of these search terms. So I really encourage folks, if you're just wanting to explore, start with the data page. It's a great place to really get your feet wet in the CivicLEADS data. So now we'll go back to our presentation. I wanted to talk a little bit more about how CivicLEADS has a focus on being multidisciplinary. It was really important to us to make CivicLEADS a place where researchers from any discipline could share their data or find new data to explore civic education and action through that lens of their own discipline. And we really understood that researchers are coming from a lot of different backgrounds and researching kind of similar elements of civic engagement and civic education. So what we wanted to share with you is a little data visualization that we prepared. If you're interested in learning more about this, you can take a look at our webinar from September, where we actually go study by study and look at some of the disciplines where folks are coming from. But what this visualization shows is we chose 6 CivicLEADS studies, and we researched what are the disciplines of those principal investigators from those studies. And what we found here on this visualization is we have a handful of people from political science, some public policy affairs, public administration people, psychology and human development, someone from a school of education, and then an other. And that other happens to be the Census Bureau, which is kind of sociology and kind of economics, and we just put them in the other category. So we can see already that our data are coming from a wide variety of disciplines. And then what we wanted to look at is how are people using that data? What disciplines are people coming from when they are examining these secondary data? And so that's what this visualization shows. This is based on those same 6 studies. What kinds of backgrounds are folks publishing from? And so we looked at the publications that were coming out of the secondary analyses of these data, and we found that not only are those same disciplines that we found in the PIs represented, but there are even more. And if you look study by study, it's not just that the political science study is being analyzed by political scientists, or that the psychology studies are being studied by psychologists. It's really every study is being examined in a multidisciplinary fashion, and sometimes interdisciplinary too. We'll find 2 authors on a paper from different disciplines looking at data from a third discipline. So it's really interesting, and we hope that this shows you, don't limit yourself. If you find data that are coming out of a discipline other than your own, there's really a lot of room for you to examine the data in a new light and with a fresh lens. And a lot of the work that's being done on the leading edge of civic education and action data research is being done across disciplinary boundaries. So what's next for CivicLEADS? What does the future hold for us? We will be releasing 3 new data sets by the end of this year, including a couple from a communication background, and we will have we'll continue to search for emerging research and the data that are coming out of that research. So if you happen upon an article or a data set that you think is really fascinating, and you think CivicLEADS needs to archive that data and share it with the world, please let us know. And if you are a researcher doing some amazing cutting-edge research and you think that your data need to be shared with the rest of the world, please let us know. We will reach out to researchers, and we always appreciate when researchers get in touch with us. And I'll give you all of our contact information in a moment. We will also be exploring new ways to document our data and to facilitate data discovery. We're always looking for another way of sharing our data with you. One of the things that we're talking about doing right now, and we're doing the background work for, is really looking at derived variables and multivariate variables. So index variables which are created from 5, 10, 15 other variables being brought together through some algorithm and then creating this new index. We really want people to be able to find both the index variables as well as the root variables, which are at the heart of those indices. So we're finding new ways to document those variables and also creating tools so that researchers can search specifically for those index variables as well as their root variables. Those are just a few things that we have planned in the future. And if you have suggestions for us, please do let us know. Both suggestions related to data sets we should be finding, or ways that would be really helpful for you to use our data in your research. What can we do for you? So to get more information about CivicLEADS, you can come to our website, which we just showed you, which is CivicLEADS.org. That will redirect you to our page within the ICPSR webpage. So don't be upset if it starts redirecting you. That's what it's supposed to do. But CivicLEADS.org, our email address is civicleads@umich.edu, and you can also go to the About page on our website and sign up for our email list. And that's where we can keep you updated about future webinars. I mentioned that we'll be releasing 3 more data sets this year, so we can keep you up to date on when those come out, and you can learn more about it. And you know, we aren't going to bombard you with messages. Everything that comes through that email list is really pertinent to the work that we're doing. So please do sign up for that email list if you haven't already. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to take a look at your questions now and see if I can answer some. Okay. So the first question is, how does CivicLEADS approach IRB and consent issues? Is it up to the original PIs to ensure that respondents are informed about the long-term use of responses? So in general, I would say that one of our preferred practices is that, and I think you can get more information out of our data preparation guide that I showed before. But one of the things that we really encourage is, as a researcher is going through the IRB process and planning data collection, to include some verbiage in the consent form that talks about the potential of data sharing in the future. So a lot of our data are not incredibly sensitive, which, you know, that's a good thing in terms of IRB. But you know, I think that as researchers become more and more proactive about thinking about ultimately sharing their data, that will become some very, you know, boilerplate language that gets inserted into more and more consent forms. So we will always work with a researcher who is looking to archive their data with us and try to help through IRB issues. But the easiest way is to plan ahead for that, and that's not always it's not always a very satisfying answer to hear, I'm sure. So we will work with you and kind of walk through a way that might satisfy your IRB if that might be an issue. Okay. So let's see, I covered the IRB. I'm sorry, I'm just going through your questions now. Do we have a module related to ethical uses of data from CivicLEADS? We do not have a module yet. That sounds like a fantastic idea of a future webinar we could do, or perhaps some resources that we can post to the website, but we do not have any sort of an existing module about the ethical uses of data currently. Are the data sets limited to questions that are multiple choices, or can we also handle questions that have written responses that may or may not be scored? We do not limit. We don't even limit to quantitative data. So we know that in the area of civic education and civic engagement, there are a lot of great qualitative studies out there. We are also aware that there are a lot of good mixed method studies out there, and so we are not limited to quantitative data. We can handle qualitative data as well as, you know, open-ended string variables. We are just fine with that. We do have a rigorous disclosure risk review process. Every single data set that comes through our system undergoes disclosure risk review, and if necessary, we will either mask variables or mask identifiable information, whether that's direct identifiers or perhaps indirect identifiers, depending on how disclosive we think the data might be. So please don't limit yourselves to thinking that we only are doing more quantitative data. Do any of our data sets provide breakdowns in small geographic areas, like county or city? Let's see, off the top of my head, I don't know that for certain. And the reason I say that is that sometimes our data sets, in disclosure risk review, we might aggregate geographies, which I know that does limit some analyses that can happen. But I do not know for certain. There are some studies that are more regionally specific, or specific to specific metropolitan areas just in their design. But I don't know that we have any national studies that have really granular geographies inside of a national level study. And I apologize that I don't know that exactly. I have a request to share the slides with us, or with the audience, and we certainly will do that. Those will be posted within a couple of days, as will the video of the webinar. So if you can bear to hear my voice for 45 minutes today, you can listen to it again tomorrow, or whenever we do get it posted to YouTube. Okay, who decides which data sets will be placed on CivicLEADS? So we do have an advisory committee who helps us to establish priorities, and we are trying to find a diverse group of high-quality data sets that we think that have a lot of utility in secondary analysis. So the advisory committee has a strong voice but ultimately the decision will be on CivicLEADS' shoulders about which data sets get released. We do not anticipate barring data sets from being released. What may happen is that other archives within ICPSR could end up releasing the data set, and that's just based on the resources of CivicLEADS. So please don't hesitate to submit data to us. We really value data sharing and think that secondary analysis is really important, and so we really want to encourage folks to share their data with us if you have something that you want to get out there. So, okay, I have a question about a specific data set. And to be honest, I don't know because it's such a specific question. It is about the methodology report and user's guide for ANES. And a lot of the features that are shown in this webinar are on the ICPSR web page. And I think that's what the user is asking me about. If users can use similar tools like the variable search within the general ICPSR website. The short answer to that is yes. Most of these tools are available on the ICPSR webpage. The more complicated answer is maybe, and that is because some of the tools are really dependent on variable level metadata, which are processed with the data and released at the same time as the data. And so if there are things like question text may have been added to a data set and may not have been. It depends on the level of processing that study received. And so the responsiveness of, say, the variable search tool is really dependent on the level of processing that those variables received. So if the variable search tool isn't working for a specific study, it's probably because of the variable level metadata that are available for that study. And I hope that is a good answer for you. Have we started any conversations with the Intercollegiate Studies Institute Civic Literacy exam? No, not to my knowledge, but that sounds like a really good lead, and we will explore that moving forward. Thank you for that suggestion. The volunteerism category is empty on the data search page. That is unfortunate. I would encourage you to search for volunteer instead. It may be the case that, let's say a survey asked a group of people, have you volunteered in the last 12 months? And so the term volunteerism might not come up, but volunteer might. So I would encourage you to try that search term. Beyond the search engine, do you have consultants available to help researchers identify data based on research questions or theoretical perspectives? We are a small team. We do try to support researchers as much as we can, and so we will do our best to help, but we can't, I don't think we can be super hands-on as far as being almost a research assistant, but we will do our best to help identify data sets that would be helpful to a researcher. So please don't hesitate to call us or email us. I think that we will do our best to help you. And if we can't help you, we'll at least let you know to what extent we can help you. Do we have any data from the American Community Surveys? At this point, we do not have the ACS data. There are some of the American Community Surveys are part of ICPSR's collections, but they are not formally part of CivicLEADS. So if you search for it on the ICPSR webpage, hopefully you'll be able to access it there. Okay, thank you. That's a good point that we specifically suggested volunteerism as a starting point. We will look to amend that. Thank you very much. Okay, that is the bottom of my question list right now. I'm wondering if anybody has any final questions as we approach the end of our time. And I don't see any additional questions. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and for joining us on this webinar. Please do be in touch, CivicLEADS@umich.edu or CivicLEADS.org. We really encourage you to explore the tool, send us your suggestions, and please be in touch. So with that, we will wrap things up and end the recording. Thank you all very much for joining us.